What is up, everybody? Sean Sheehan back here with another edition of the Sheehan Show for Sherdog.com. And it's a massive card coming up this weekend at UFC 270 as Francis Ngannou defends his UFC heavyweight title against his former teammate Ciryl Gane. Out in California, we have the co-main event with the flyweight title. So we're going from large to little, I suppose, in this one, with Deiveson Figueiredo taking on the champion Brandon Moreno for the third time in a fight I suppose a lot of people didn't expect to get. Some people didn't want it, but I do think it will be a fun fight, and I'm looking forward to kind of breaking it down here as well. Now, I'm going to talk about those two fights and kind of concentrate on those. I'm sure the lads will have big previews out on the rest of the card as well. There's some fights I'm really looking forward to. I'm looking forward to Vieira versus Thurman. I'm really looking forward to Said Nurmagomedov fighting in the UFC again. Tony Gravely, I'm a big fan of his. I think he's a very good fighter coming through. I know he lost there recently, but I think he has a big upside. I'm looking forward to seeing his future. Same goes for someone like Hani Barsolas as well. Elia Topuria, Miguel Pereira, he's one of my favourite fighters to watch in the world. I hope he comes out and he's the excited Miguel Pereira that we all know and love. But you know, Topuria, again, I mentioned him quickly there, but him versus Charles Jourdain, obviously, he was supposed to fight, who's he supposed to fight? Ivalev, wasn't it? Yeah, in this one, and that could have been a fight of the year contender. Unfortunately, that one isn't happening, but it's good to still see him on this card, and it's good to still, to still have an exciting prospect like that who could be, you know, one of your, maybe not a star, but one of your next really big fighters coming through in the UFC on a big card like this. So I think that makes a lot of sense for the UFC brass and for for the promotion itself, making trying to make money going forward. So yeah, I think he will be. I think he'll get the win there, and I think it'll be stand up. Well, maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that on the betting show. So let's talk about the two big fights here in the co-main and in the main event. Now, I think the first thing to talk about with these fights is something I've kind of talked about here and on my other podcasts as well over the last while, is, and especially in the co-main event, is the matchmaking. And because, look, obviously the first fight was a draw between Figueiredo and Moreno. Moreno has had, you know, the career he's had, and to get to where I suppose he's got the draw and then the win for him, obviously. Figueiredo a little bit reminds me of Amanda Nunes, where everyone kind of knows they have the talent, although maybe me a little bit later than other people, and people give out to me because I wasn't maybe as sold to him as others, but I think a lot of people could see him coming through how good he was going to be. Then he was just devastating everyone, like knocking Joseph Benavidez out and submitting him about 4 times in a minute in the same fight. Just looked devastating, and then he kind of has a bit of a downfall immediately. And now, what's that got to do? Now we'll get to what it's got to do with the second, but the matchmaker for that is like, after that second fight, I felt like a lot of people thought it was time for Figueiredo to either move to 135, which I think a lot of people agree with, and that was my kind of position on it. He'd be better off 135. There's some very fun fights there. Even someone like Cody Garbrandt, I think, would be a fun fight, or Jose Aldo, or a Frankie Edgar maybe at the time. Now, maybe not now, but there's a lot of fun fights for him there. And then, you know, 1 or 2 fights away from a title shot, a former champion in the weight class below. He's not going to be too far away, or else find a way of maybe getting more healthily down to 125 and doing it that way, and get a fight or two to prove you can do that, rather than going right into a 5-round fight where it's going to be very, very tough as well. Now, that didn't happen, and this was kind of made, and I think a lot of people were like, oh, is that the fight to be made? Is that we weren't? And it's more like, it's not that we didn't want to see the fight. It's just like, well, we maybe weren't expecting it. We're like, well, okay, yeah, that one's me, all right, yeah, but it's one you really, really would have passed over in your mind, if that makes a little bit of sense. And maybe that's unfair on Figueiredo, considering, you know, the first fight was a draw, and in my opinion, he won that fight, and it wasn't a great decision. Actually, in whichever year it was, and I think it was 2019, 2020, it was one of the worst decisions that year, in my opinion, when I was getting to the awards at the end of the year. So absolutely he deserves this spot in certain ways, but I just think because of the weight issues, because of the way he fought due to those weight issues, I think a lot, and due to Brandon Moreno as well, don't get me wrong, in the last fight, I think it was just time to maybe move on from this fight for a while, but it wasn't. And in the main event with the matchmaking in this, it's one that's obviously been talked about over and over and over. Ciryl Gane is coming into this. We'd almost forget it as the interim champion after they made that interim belt not too long after Francis won his belt, when he was basically saying, right, I need like another few weeks out to prepare or whatever he wants to do, and they decided to make the interim belt. There was obviously the big talk of John Jones versus Francis, or maybe even John Jones versus Stipe before that, or, you know, whatever it might be. And they kind of bypassed that because they didn't want to pay John Jones. And now we have Gane coming in here with his interim belt. So it's the melding of kind of mad matchmaking for Francis not giving him Jones, and then for Gane giving him the title shot, obviously, against, who did he fight for? Was it Derek? I don't know who he fought. I can't trouble remember. It was Derek Lewis, wasn't it? Yeah. But that kind of... Look, it shows what the UFC is today. And I actually have a podcast coming up for over in my other place over in Severe Med this week, talking about kind of matchmaking and talking about the weird way UFC does it these days. It's like, you know, if anyone follows the Premier League, it's like Premier League managers here. If you get sacked from one job, when in the next, you know, the next guy to get sacked, you'll probably take his job and he'll probably take your job. And, it's just a merry-go-round. Whereas, like, I feel like in the UFC, it's the same thing. Justin Gaethje loses title fight, wins one fight, he's back in. He loses another fight, he wins one fight, and he'll be back in. Max Holloway, Jose Aldo, all these different divisions. It just feels like it's a merry-go-round of, like, we have an idea for who's getting a title shot. Let's stick with that idea for like 3 years in a row, and let's not give like the new guys coming through the shot. And I think that's a big issue, and that's obviously a very different point from this card, so I will digress on that one. But I do think the UFC matchmaking has got significantly worse over the years, especially since Joe Silva went. But I will digress on that one. To talk about a little bit about the co-main event first, and then I'll give a bigger breakdown, I think, of the main event, although maybe in a more agricultural way, maybe. This co-main event, look, I don't want to be disrespectful to Brandon Moreno. Look, we know how good he is. He's good striking, good boxing. He submitted Figueiredo on the last fight. He's very good on the ground. He's a well-rounded fighter, a very, very good top-level fighter. Like, if you were to ask a lot of people before he won the title, a lot of people probably would have said, look, he's a good top 10 to top 5 fighter in the UFC's 125-pound division. Will he ever be the champion? You know, maybe not. Could he fight for it a couple of times? Yeah, I think a lot of people probably would have said that. But I think he has risen to the occasion, especially in the second fight, and he's proved himself a really, really good fighter. Now, he's always a very good fighter, don't get me wrong, but I think we need to give him like an extra little bit of respect. Having said that, I might sound a little bit disrespectful here, but I think this fight will, in a large way, boil down to what Deiveson Figueiredo turns up here. I think if we get the best Deiveson Figueiredo, if we get Deiveson Figueiredo who's working with the best nutritionists in the world, who gets down to 125 pounds and is, you know, going up, that's 125 championship weight, kind of a job, you know, like that, looking healthy and looking cocky at that weight, and he goes in looking like that in the first or second round, I think he'll get the finish, and I think he'll win early. I honestly do. I think he's that good. I think he's that good of a fighter. And that, look, I think a large portion of that has to do with the weight cut, but I think it's also to do with the mentality. Like, he's no longer the champion. Will he still have like the champion mindset? The champion mindset in a negative way now here of like, I'm the best in the world, I'm just going to get my title back. You know, we've seen that as a massive downfall for fighters before as the champions, not so much from guys who've lost the belt and come back, but it's tough to do that sometimes as well. Like, look at Luke Rockhold against Michael Bisping. He thought I always describe it as he thought he was going into the post office to pick up a package, and just all he had to do was take his belt and that was it and go home. Well, it didn't work out so well. And you know, if Deiveson Figueiredo comes in here and thinks it's going to be easy, it might be. You know, it might be easy. It might knock him out in 90 seconds. But what if it's not? What if he takes those 2 or 3 shots? What if he takes those 2 or 3 rounds, comes through it, and Brandon Moreno is still standing there and he decides to take over? It's a very, very different situation then. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how that goes and seeing what Figueiredo shows up. Really, this is a fight you could break down and you could talk about it in depth, and I'm sure some of the better analysts than me will do that and talk about it from different stylistic points of views. But look, Figueiredo, to me, if he shows up, as I said, at his very best, I think like those power shots that he throws, the confidence in his shots, those uppercuts when he comes inside, throwing shots from the hip with big power, and he seems to be able to take a good shot as well, at least early. He's a finisher. When he has you hurt, he will jump down on a rear naked choke or a guillotine or whatever it might be and just devastate you on the ground. Like, his nickname should be Devastating Deiveson Figueiredo. Like, how is that not his nickname? You know, that's what it should be. He's just brilliant in that area. You know, he's just a brilliant fighter. And if he's that same fighter, I think Moreno... Look, Moreno is a very good, as I mentioned earlier on, a very good technical, tactical fighter. But when someone's special, like Figueiredo is a special fighter. There was people talking about him against Mighty Mouse and all that. Now, Deiveson Figueiredo at his best is like one of the only people ever in that division who I would even think about matching with Mighty Mouse at his best. Like, I know Cejudo beat Mighty Mouse, but Mighty Mouse was coming off of a shoulder injury and different things, and I don't think he actually even won that decision. But I think Cejudo at his best doesn't touch Mighty Mouse. I think Moreno at his best doesn't touch Mighty Mouse, or any of them at their best don't touch him. Figueiredo, maybe, and that's how much I think of him. That's how good of a fighter I think he is. But it's a lot, you know. We talked about it with Nunes, we talked about it with McGregor, we talked about it with many others. Like, was it being the champion? Was it, you know, taking your head off a swivel? Was it taking your eyes off the prize? Or was it the weight cut? You know, okay, let's say it was both of those things. Next question is, can you fix that? Can you fix the mental point of view? That's going to be tough, very tough. Can you fix the weight cutting? That's going to be very tough as well. If the answer is no to either of those questions, he'll probably lose. If it's yes to both of them, he'll probably win. So we will see coming up. And you know, we probably won't even know until afterwards, or might never know what the answer to those questions is. But look, those are the questions I suppose we all have to ask ourselves as we talk about mixed martial arts in this wonderful sport. But the main event it's a very interesting one, and I described earlier on, I think it as maybe a more agricultural breakdown of this fight, and that's exactly what it's going to be, I think, from my point of view. Francis Ngannou, if you were to describe him, if someone started watching MMA a few years ago, had dipped out of it and go, all right, who's the heavyweight champion, describe what he's like, what would you say? Well, it's this physical, phenomenal freak who is unapologetically unafraid, who throws massive big shots and is not scared in any way of getting hit or hurt or taken down when he throws those shots. And he will catch you, even if it's only half a shot, and he will knock you out. Now, yeah, there you go. That would describe Francis up until a point. Now, I think he's adjusted a little bit, especially that last Stipe fight. He was a little less agricultural, a little bit of a jab on him more than he had before. He was thinking about his shots. He was picking his shots a little bit better. His takedown defense was certainly a lot better in that fight as well, as we saw. So he still has the pop. He still has the, the unnerving power and the unwillingness not to throw it, if that makes sense with my double negative there. He will just throw all the time, and he will try to land those big shots whenever he gets half a chance even. And the thing about Francis Ngannou, we'll get to Gane in a second, and we'll get to whether he will do this or not. But the thing about Francis Ngannou is, if you give him half a chance, you're probably already lost. And you have a decision to make what you do with him in that position. Like, if you're, let's say, Stipe, everyone saw the first fight where Stipe took him down. You're talking about the second fight. Should you go in and take him down again? Well, if you do, what about that big uppercut that's coming in? Or what about maybe a little bit of a knee? What about his takedown defense if he stops you once and he throws those elbows inside? Or what if you land a big shot and then he hits you with an even bigger one, as happened to Stipe? There's just so much danger with Francis Ngannou. Almost the only thing to be not dangerous against, or safe is the word, there you go, safe, against Francis, is just to stay away from him, and I believe it's the big octagon here on Saturday night. They're no longer in the UFC Apex, so I think it will be the big octagon. That will be a huge service to Ciryl Gane. So we've talked about Francis. We kind of know what Francis is. A guy who will throw all the shots in the world to try to knock you out. A little bit more refined in his last fight. Let's see if he's more refined in this fight. But we've seen a guy now who can fight in a devastating finishing way, and in a more tactical, structural way, while still being devastatingly finishing at the end of it. So, you know, not just the power. Ciryl Gane, he is the exact opposite. You know, if you were, again, to talk to someone who hasn't watched MMA in a few years and tell me what Ciryl Gane is like, he is the, I suppose, the apex of heavyweight tacticians and technicians. That's exactly how I'd probably describe him. Like, we have probably the greatest athlete we've ever seen in the heavyweight division in Francis Ngannou. Now, maybe, you know, maybe Brock Lesnar would argue with that a little bit, or maybe there's a couple more I'm forgetting. You know, Randy Couture, in terms of what he's done, maybe could argue with it, or others as well. But I think as a physical athlete, I think it's either Francis or Brock. Maybe someone else comes to mind, you know, Mark Coleman or Kevin Randleman, or lads back in the day. No disrespect to any of those lads, but look, he's in that discussion for, you know, he might be the best, but he's top one. I think was it Brian Clough family said, or something like that, to paraphrase him anyway. But he's up there. And then on the other side, if you were to say who is the greatest technician in the history of the UFC or the MMA's heavyweight division, okay, people probably give out to me as well. Is it Fedor? Is it Junior Dos Santos? Is it Kane in certain ways? I think they all have arguments, but I think Ciryl is it. You know, I don't think there is anyone there with Ciryl, and Stipe as well obviously should be in that discussion. But I think, look, Stipe might be the close second there, but I think Ciryl is it, with Francis on the other side of it. So we have those two meetings of two of the best ever to do it in their way of fighting, now meeting each other. But to get into Gane a little bit more, and we'll talk about the meeting again once I've that done. Like, I think what he's great at is being a risk-averse fighter in the heavyweight division like none we've ever seen before. Like, if you look at Dominic Cruz at bantamweight, he was almost a risk-averse fighter out, if you leave maybe wrestlers aside, okay? In maybe the first one in the sport, or the first one to do it in such a technical, kind of intelligent way in the sport. Now, at 135 pounds is obviously a lot harder and a lot different, because you're going to have to move your head a lot more, considering there's probably a lot more shots coming at you a lot faster from guys who can catch you maybe a little bit more. Whereas in the heavyweight division, you're fighting guys who aren't thrown as much, and who are maybe not as not as quick as the likes of maybe a Deiveson Figueiredo coming up, or a Mighty Mouse, or a Joseph Benavidez at that time, fighting at 135 pounds against Dominic Cruz. So in certain ways, it's easier for Ciryl Gane to do that in the heavyweight division. But why have we never really seen anyone do that in the heavyweight division before? Well, the reason for that is we've never had an athlete like Ciryl Gane in the heavyweight division before, who can do the things he does and move the way he does, move the way he moves. He moves like, I don't know what weight class to say. I would say a lightweight, maybe a welterweight, maybe even a middleweight. I wouldn't slag him by calling him a middleweight. I think he's better than that. But he moves like someone way smaller than what he is. He moves like a heavyweight we've never seen before, and he does it. You know, we've seen how, look, Francis Ngannou can move really well, and he does it in a fashion we've seen other heavyweights try to fight before. I don't think we've ever seen one try to fight as technically beautifully as Ciryl Gane does, with his lovely jabs, and he kicks from the outside, and he's 1-2s inside, and he's circling, and he's, you know, throwing shots from a far distance, winning fights, you know, on points over 5 rounds by tactically beating someone. That's something, look, we've seen John Jones doing at 205, or we've seen, you know, Usman doing a little bit, and we've seen Woodley do it, and we've seen Max Holloway do it, and Jose Aldo do it, and, you know, Valentina Shevchenko do it, and other people, but we've not really seen it at heavyweight in this sort of manner. And now we have with Ciryl Gane, and he's done it so well, and he's absolutely brilliant at it. He picks guys off without getting hit in the division where if you do get hit, you're in big trouble. So that risk averse, I'll say it again, is exactly what Ciryl Gane is. I think a little blip of his career, I suppose, was finding the middle ground between being risk averse and being offense averse as well, if you want to put it that way. But I think he solved that a little bit. I think he's throwing more shots after a certain point, and kind of lulling guys into the fight and the pace that he wants them to fight at. And then when they are in that pace, he will land his 1 or 2 shots, then lull them back into that pace. They're like waiting for the next few shots to come. They don't come until he wants to throw them, and in over and over and over again in that certain way. So, look, the question is, as we get to Francis versus Ciryl, can Ciryl do to Francis what he's done to everyone else? And can Francis do to Ciryl what he has done to everyone else? That's a question I suppose we have in every fight. But this one, as I mentioned at the start, it's a very agricultural breakdown here. Will it be the big knockout? Will it be the 5-round victory for Gane? That is the question. That is the reason we'll all tune in next Saturday night, and God forbid the poor people over in America will have to pay their $69 or whatever it is. Thankfully, we get it. I was going to say free here. It's not really free. We have to pay our BT Sports subscription, but we'll be able to. That's the reason we're all tuning in. You know, whether you pay that money or whether you're watching it, you know, flying to the UK to watch it, or however you're watching it. That's the reason we're tuning in. To see whose game plan, whose ability will supersede the other person. And that's what we tuned in back in 1993 for, wasn't it? To see UFC 1, to see whether jiu-jitsu can win or whether boxing can win or karate or whatever it might be. Okay, it's a lot different and a lot more nuanced and a lot better now. But we're still tuning in to see whose style can beat who else's style. And that's the sort of thing that gets me excited. Because I don't know. Like, I'll give you my pick on, my pick is Ciryl Gane. I think Ciryl Gane will win. I believe in him. I believe in his style. I believe in technique. I believe in tactics. And I think he'll win. But I don't know. I like, it could go 15 seconds and Francis Ngannou could land 1 shot. And Shawnee's prediction is down the drain and what matter. That could happen. But I think if we do see that 25-minute Ciryl Gane tactical masterclass, it will be one of the most insane things we've ever seen in the UFC or in MMA. And maybe it won't be appreciated for that by the crowd there or on the night. But I think it will be insane if it happens. Now, another big thing, and the last thing I will leave it at here, for both guys, what are we going to see a little bit different? Like, could we see a little bit more attacking from Ciryl? Could we see him trying to get the finish over Francis and believing in his defensive ability and his speed and his head movement to get away from the fights of the shots of Francis? That would probably be a little bit foolhardy, maybe. Will Ciryl throw in a little bit of takedown, game just to keep Francis guessing? No, maybe, and even if not to keep him guessing, to get a few takedowns, I think it'd be really, really good for Ciryl. What can Francis do? I think he's going to kick the leg a lot. That would be my prediction for this. I think he'll try to make Ciryl pay for the long distance, and I think he will be trying to close that distance and kick, not closing distance like just barging in all the time. He will do that at times, absolutely. That is Francis Ngannou. But I think he will try to close that long distance and the long periods of long distance by throwing lots of leg kicks. But what can he do? Maybe he can get a takedown. Maybe he can get in when Cyryl's expecting him to explode high. Maybe he can explode low, get the takedown and take him down, or do something else, change up his stances, or wait on Ciryl more. Don't chase Ciryl, make Ciryl chase you. That's going to be a tough thing to do as well, I think, for Francis. But we'll see on Saturday night as well, I suppose. And I'm really looking forward to it. Really, really looking forward to these top 2 fights. And some of the other ones underneath it as well. It should be absolutely astounding and very, very fun. Right, I will leave it there. Thanks to everybody for listening. Hit that subscribe button. Go over and visit Sherdog.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at SeanSheehanBA. Thanks to my guy John Brannigan and all the team over at Sherdog.com as well for putting this video together. My name is Sean Sheehan, and I'll see you all next time.